Shaggy.
Oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm actually perfect with Shaggy judging.
Okay, I've never seen Shaggy judge, but we can have him judge.
Okay.
Okay, alright, do you want to give an argument, or do you want me to start off with an argument?
I don't mind giving an argument.
Okay. Um. Okay. Before we start with your argument, can we just give my arguments? Because I know for a fact
Yeah,
that. Yeah. Okay. So, do you know what error theory is?
yeah.
Okay. So, all I'm gonna say is that in simple, we could just go back to my server real quick. So I have like a little personal server for all my little information that I've gathered over like the past month. Just give me a second. There it is. Boom, 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 boom. All right. Okay. So, just give me a second. Okay, there it is. Okay. So I'm just gonna say that. Okay, I'm just giving a little thing here. If there are moral duties, then there are categorical reasons to obey them. There are no categorical reasons. Therefore, there are no
Wait, I'm
objective
sorry.
moral duties.
Wait, hold on. Can you repeat that? Sorry, I wasn't close by my phone.
Okay. Actually, hold on, I'm quick. Actually, I'll just say, um, objective values would have to be something unlike anything else in this world. If we were aware of objective values, it would have to be through some special faculty, like moral perception or intuition. But why should we think we have such faculty that puts us in touch with objective values? Because even if objective values existed, we would have no way of being aware of them. We might as well conclude they don't exist. Okay. We started
Do you
laughing.
know
Go
what? Okay. Do you know what moral realism is?
Can you can you clarify?
Yeah.
What we do with it? Yeah, go
All
ahead.
moral realism would be is just the position that ethical statements and sentences express propositions that refer to objective features of the world, right? And some of which may be true to the extent that they report these features accurately, right? So essentially, all we would be saying in moral realism is that it posits that there are moral facts which are objective and independent of subjective opinion. Moral statements express propositions that refer to these moral facts, that these moral facts can be true or false, and that these moral statements can be true or false depending on whether they are accurately reported by these facts, and that moral truths are objective, universal, transcending cultures, times, and situations essentially, right? Now, the idea of whether we can understand these moral facts or not, rather these moral facts are things that should be completely revealed to us through our intuition, is something that I don't think is necessarily an issue with cognitivism or views in cognitivism, such as moral realism, right? Because the idea of whether we interpret these moral facts or not doesn't really it doesn't really differ from the fact that they can exist, right? For example, we'll give an example, right? If we
Yeah.
say that the moral statement killing is wrong, right? Let's say that this is a moral statement. Let's presuppose for a second in some imaginary world that this statement would be true, right? And that this is a truth apt statement, right? The idea that in this world, if we can imagine that these intuitions may not be the case and stuff like that, we'd obviously naturally say, no, that's false, even if it's true. Similar to how people deny science, similar to how people deny other objective features of the world, regardless of our natural, intuitions or, general inferences that we may make based off of false pretenses or false ideologies that we may follow or have, right? Or false foundations that we have. So my question to you is, why does the lack of our intuition in certain instances necessarily lead to the idea that we can't follow this, or necessarily lead to the fact of the conclusion that more anti-realism would be the way? Because all I understand more anti-realism to posit is just that there are no objective morals, facts, or normative facts, which just means that like these moral judgments and claims are not based on any external objective reality, but rather subjective and relative to individual perspectives and cultural contexts. So I'm not exactly sure how your statement would necessarily lead to that conclusion.
Okay, so I'm quickly just like answer your question, right? What I'm saying is kind of just like this might sound stupid, but like an epistemological view, right? If we can't be aware of something, right, but we could but we call it objective, right? Or we say something exists, but we have no way of being aware that it exists, right? Then it's more likely to be the case that it doesn't exist, right? Kind of like how let me give you an example. Let me just think of something. Let's say oxygen. Originally we weren't
Right.
aware of how of it existing, right? But we know it exists based off of the fact that we have conducted research on it and found
Mm-hmm.
that it is it does exist and that we inhale oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide, right? But what I'm saying with this
Okay.
whole point is that if we aren't aware of something to be true, we just like, for example, it's kind of like if we don't know if something is true or not, we should just take it to not be true unless we have some good basis for believing it is. And the argument
Oh,
from
okay.
Aquinas, yeah.
Wait, are you just saying that since we haven't, are you just making essentially the claim that if we have no observable evidence and it's outside of our exhaustive knowledge, then we cannot confirm on whether this is the case? So therefore, the conclusion that we would have objective moral values and normative facts would be baseless?
I'm saying we have no way of being aware of them, so you might as well conclude that they
Okay.
don't exist.
That is not Shinra at all.
What? Yeah, I'm Shino Trust.
All right, gotcha. So I think that there are, right, and I have a few arguments for such. As I mentioned, moral realism is going to be the position that essentially I'm trying to posit, right, to come against that conclusion. I'll just restate the idea of moral realism that I take it to be, which is just that ethical sentences express propositions that refer to the objective features of the world, and some of may, which be true to the extent that they those features accurately, right? And there are I'd like to remind you two ideas of moral realism and two main approaches. First, the approach of naturalism, and this approach just generally suggests that moral facts can be reduced to non-moral facts. For example, a statement such as kindness is good could be objectively measured by physiological responses to acts of kindness, and then we can go by the idea of non-naturalism, right? And this approach just insists that moral values are irreducible to natural properties or facts, right? And instead, moral truths are self-evident and not dependent on the nature of facts, right? So again, there are two approaches, right? So keep in mind of non-naturalism and naturalism when I give this argument, right? Because this is more of an argument from more of a naturalistic basis. So, are you aware of the argument essentially from non-maleficence?
For what?
Non-maleficence.
I've never heard of what that
Okay,
beneficence
so
is.
so essentially, all the argument from non-maleficence is just saying, right, is that not doing harm is necessary for human flourishing and well-being, and that these principles are considered objective because they apply to all humans regardless of cultures or personal differences, and they reflect on the actual facts of reality that can be measured by science and anatomical parameters,
Wait, hold on, repeat that, my
obviously
bad.
such as our sorry, repeat what?
Did you repeat that like the part about cultures? What about cultures?
Okay, so yeah, I was gonna say, so these things could be measured outside of, all cultures and personal differences and whatnot, right?
Yeah.
Essentially, the idea of well-being and the idea of human flourishing, right? Because obviously, in order to support a societal standard, in order to support a society, we would need to essentially take care of each other, right? And we would essentially, if we just unnecessarily murder each other and hate each other, not even necessarily just hate, but if we cause physical harm to each other and stuff like that, obviously in this instance it'd be applying to a real world, and in this instance these moral statements and whatnot would be applied, right? If we were to make the statement, oh, in this instance murder is bad, that is something that is directly connective to the idea of our physiology, which essentially is just applicative to naturalism, right? Because as I stated, for example, the statement kindness is good could be objectively measured by physiological responses to acts of kindness, right? Essentially, we're just going to be taking the argument that most moral realists argue that moral principles are necessary for human society to function effectively, and that these principles provide a framework for making decisions, guiding behavior, allowing individuals to live together in harmony and cooperation, which can lead to health benefits and which apply to our objective features of the world.
Is that you done?
Mhm.
All right, give me a second. All right. So, all I'm gonna say, right, is okay. So so okay. So just correct me if I'm wrong. When you say naturalist, you're saying a viewpoint that asserts that everything arises from natural properties and causes, and that supernatural or spiritual explanations are either non-existent or irrelevant.
Okay. So what an ethical naturalist is just a person who suggests that moral facts can be reduced to non-moral facts. So for example, the idea if we were to say that kindness is good, kindness is something that can be measured by physical acts of kindness, right? And these are physiological responses to acts of kindness that we're seeing in an instance of making someone happy, right? And this differs from non-naturalism because non-naturalism in this approach, it just insists that moral values are irreducible to natural properties of facts, right? And instead, these moral truths are self-evident and not necessarily dependent on natural facts being inclusive of things being measured by physiological responses.
Yo,
So,
Archie.
what's up?
Yo, I just have a quick question. Like,
Yo.
do you think that materialists, like in philosophy, man, who argue materialism, do you think they can only verify things via first and second order logic?
Um, I think it
Like,
depends on what type of materialist you are.
like just the main bulk, like I think that they're only limited to just being able to prove things via first and second order logic, just based off their stance alone.
Well, I mean, well, first, what do you mean by first order logic? Because I'm thinking of math right now when you're talking about that. Like just a system that allows us to express general statements about objects and their properties.
Wait, what'd you say?
Okay, wait, first, what do you mean when you say second order logic?
It's like the first order logic, like using quantified variables.
Right, exactly. Right,
Yeah.
it's just characterized by its use of quantifiers, which, are variables that range over objects, etc. And what do you take second order logic to be?
Uh,
Just that quantification is just also allowed over predicate, variables.
yeah.
Right.
Sure.
And what are you taking with this again?
That I'm asking you, like, in your personal opinion, like, do you believe that they materialists can only be limited to first and second order logic in terms of verification for the argument? Because I don't think they'll be able to access things such as higher
I
order
mean,
logic.
I wouldn't say necessarily limited to, but I'd say if you want to be expressive of such statements in a way that it is expressive of an actual physicalist stance, which I mean, in an instance, I'm assuming that's really what you're referring to when you refer to materialism, then yeah.
You lot can go ahead and have your debate.
Okay.
Okay. So, what's a way you think that we can measure kindness? When you say kindness, what do you think a way of measuring that would be?
A way of measuring kindness. So,
Yeah.
in the instance of moral realism, rather than measuring kindness, we're just measuring the physiological responses to acts of kindness, which may be if you give someone, let's say, a rose petal on a random day, they may be very happy. If you give someone a compliment on their hair, naturally they're going to get this sense of serotonin, endorphins, and other neuroreceptors that go through their brain, which cause them to be happy and whatnot. In an instance of, let's say, if you say, you look like terrible today, you look ugly, right? It may cause someone to not have such responses, and it may cause someone to have such a good day, and it may cause someone to have these other physiological responses that are accounted for in this objective state of reality.
Okay. So, what about people who don't experience emotions? And also, like, what about people that have like bipolar depression in the sense that they have like erratic emotions, just happiness, then they just completely like feel like completely depressed in that sense? Because I don't think that in every single sense of the word we can like say that emotions prove objective morality, because the example, like people like just random sprouts of like I guess say hyperness, right? And that it's not like it's necessarily like emotion, but like it's an example of bipolar depression in a sense. ADHD have depression, but I'm saying that the hyperness is an example of what a person with bipolar depression might experience, in the sense that they might have random spouts of joy and then just absolute depression. But I'm saying, like, what about people that don't have emotions or experience emotions? How can we measure that?
Okay, so
Like how
again,
the physiological response?
oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
go on. All right.
No, you're good. I was gonna say basically, right? In this instance, right, we're still seeing physiological responses. It doesn't necessarily matter what the physiological response is, right? Because obviously we understand, right, there are language barriers. And we understand that the properties of analytical attributes can't necessarily just be rounded out to one system of connotative usage, because we understand there are multiple regional connotations that people interpret, right? That's why we have different idiomatic expressions. Let's say in Japan, if you were to tell someone in Japan it's raining cats and dogs, they're probably not going to interpret that as it's just raining really hard. They're probably going to interpret that as it's raining food, right? So it's a bit different, and they may take it more hyper literally than they would, let's
Food
say,
is
the
crazy.
American, right? So we understand that we do have different instances and we do have different emotional responses depending on environmental factors. But the fact that these responses are being shown in the objective fact of reality, and the fact that these responses are things that affect the person and their voluntary action and their future action that they take, you know, in the future, these things are objective features and essentially like key factors of reality that we're seeing that boil down from such moral statements. Right? Because remember, all we take it in this instance is just that the fact that these moral statements and facts can be reduced to non-moral facts. So we're really just taking the approach of this thing insists that such a statement, kindness is good, is objectively measured by physiological responses to acts of kindness, and that murder is bad is measured by physiological responses to acts of murder, right? So in this instance, it's very, very similar, and that's kind of one of the bases of the principle of non-maleficence. Because in this instance, right, generally it's just a fundamental concept that's used in medical ethics, which emphasizes the importance of avoiding harm to patients. But this principle is also rooted in the Hippocratic Oath, which in other sense just makes people pledge do not harm to such patients. So, in essence, the non maleficence idea and the principle that we're using in the moral debate right here is just to say that in these instances, if we can measure these physiological responses from terms of harm, terms of societies, for example, I gave you the analogy if a society were to just constantly kill each other, we wouldn't see these good results come from this society. We're still seeing these physical responses being measured, right? So in this instance, it'd be a form of measuring the idea of the conclusion that we can form these physical responses and we can kind of calculate them, right? And but we also have to remember what's the idea of moral anti-realism. Because remember, this is just a meta-ethical doctrine that posits that there's no objective moral values or normative facts, right? Which just means that moral judgments and claims cannot be based on external objective reality, but rather subjective and relative to individual perspectives and cultural context. But the idea that we see these physiological responses from anyone, regardless of culture, obviously, even if the responses may differ from each other, they're still responses. So we're still seeing this thing based on this external reality that we're showing. There can't simply just be subjective reality. And in this instance, it would kind of contradict the idea of error theory or moral anti-realism, right?
Um. Okay. My bad. If okay, but like, can you like summarize it just like quickly, real quick?
Which part?
Just like the point that you're trying to make with this.
Okay, so basically, all we're saying with this instance is just that regardless of if we see different physiological responses due to mental conditions or things that people may have, we're not measuring what kind of physiological response they have. We're measuring the fact that they do have physiological responses, which are directly correspondent with these external features of reality. Because we have to keep in mind of what moral anti-realism or air theory is, right? This is just a metaethical doctrine that posits the fact that there are no objective moral values or normative facts, which just means that the moral judgments and claims that are not based on any external or objective reality are rather subjective, right? And relative to the individual perspectives or cultural context that we generally see. To which, in the instance of moral realism, while I'm positing by my position, is just that ethical statements and sentences can express propositions that refer to the objective features of reality, some of which may be true to the extent that they report those features accurately. And in the instance of naturalism, we're just simply stating that moral facts can be reduced to non moral facts, which is simply why I gave the example of the statement kindness is good, which can be physiologically measured in the objective sense of these actions, right? Which actions we take it to be are external features of our world, since these things are being performed physically rather than mentally, right? So we just take it that we can see these external responses and correlations in the external reality, which if we do measure them and see them, that obviously, is disagreeing with the idea of air theory, which states the opposite, right?
Well, I don't mean if it sounds kind of like circular, but like in the sense there are some conditions which are neurological, which affect serotonin, dopamine, and endorphin levels. An example of this is Parkinson's disease. If you want me to go into this, I can. But that's an example of one that affects, like, I guess you could say, like, the endorphin response. And the response we're about, this can, I guess, like, in a sense, be explained by the fact that some people don't even experience emotions that are external, such as, let's say, a person like who gets complimented by a smile. People with like mental health disorders such as schizoid personality disorder would be an example of where they have like literally like no um no external emotions, and like I guess like not like a lot of like physiological responses such as an increase in dopamine levels when they might be complemented, endorphins when they might work out. There's many different things we can like attribute to like I guess say emotions, but I guess say some emotions can't be experienced. So what would your response to that be? The fact that some physiological responses, such as endorphins, are stopped by I guess say disorders and diseases such as Parkinson's.
Yeah. So generally, we deal with the idea, and I'll address first the instances of whether we see and measure the physiological responses to acts of kindness and to other acts of emotion, other acts that we would generally consider to be a normatively good decision, whether subjectively or objectively, right? We give the example of Parkinson's disease. Many known symptoms of Parkinson's disease obviously affect them physically, which include tremors, muscle stiffness, slowness of movement, posture changes, etc., balance problems. But we also know that affects them mentally as well, including depression, including overstimulation, and also including random moments of happiness and euphoria. Right. And we understand that these things are very reactive to words. For example, if you were to tell a depressed person, you should probably, like end it, they'd
Yeah, yeah.
probably feel some type of way towards it, right? And they'd probably feel like, well, why would you ever tell me that? That's very rude, right? Or they'd probably say, maybe I agree with that. Maybe they didn't say such a bad thing. Maybe I agree with that, and maybe I'm gonna use that as motivation, right? We obviously see different instances, but the fact that these things are going to our physical accounts and to the way we interpret things and almost affecting us in the way to our physical action is affected is an example of these physiological responses. Because remember, it's not necessarily the variation of emotion that we're feeling, but it's the reaction to this variation of emotion that we are observing. That is something that's observed in the external world, right? Which would be a basis and argument for the idea that these moral statements do have correspondence to external features of reality, which obviously is disagreeable in air theory, right? And to the idea, um, what's it called? Sorry, I'm not gonna lie, I forgot your second point. It
Uh,
was
it was schizoid. People that don't show external emotions, such as like
Oh yeah, yeah,
smiling.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I remember. So essentially, even if there are some people, because I do agree, there are some people who are physically incapable of showing physical emotion, right? But that's completely okay because emotion affects our actions as well. For example, if someone were to say, I don't feel very good about," or for example, if let's say someone punched someone who couldn't physically show emotion, even if they and they react and they defend themselves in anger. They may not be physically expressing the anger in terms of their facial expressions or their expression, but the action of fighting and whatnot is still something that would be considered a physiological response to such emotion, right? And such moral action and statements, right? And even if we take the fact that these people can't at all, we'd still have to understand the fact that there are other people who do have these expressions and physiological responses, and error theory is denying the possibility of any. Because remember, the basis of error theory is just simply stating that there are no objective moral facts or normative facts that we can see, and that no moral judgments and no moral claims are based on any external objective reality and rather subjective and relative individual experiences. But we understand the idea that everyone universally has physiological responses unless they are paralyzed and whatnot, and they physically simply cannot. That means we are still saying, at least on a form of some physiological response, which in this instance would be contradictory to the idea of what your idea and ideology represents.
Well, I think that in some sense, um, I guess subjective morality is in a sense like not possible. Or when I say not possible, I'm not talking about like in terms of like a modal scope, but I mean like it's just it's not the
Yeah.
case, right? And the reason why I believe this is because there are centuries of philosophical inquiries and dialogue and agreements persist. People from different cultures and backgrounds often have conflicting moral views on fundamental issues. An example of this, right, is that, for example, let's say, let's say for example, is like pro-choice. I might like completely disagree with what his view is in the fact that he believes the woman should get to decide, and I might believe that the baby life should value with euthanasia and capital punishment. For example, America, in America you can still get the death penalty, but in England you could not get a death penalty. And I would say that the persistence of disagreement is what like objective moral values exist. Because why would everyone disagree on such a fundamental level on issues such as abortion, euthanasia, and capital punishment?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I really don't understand what conclusion you're trying to derive from this.
Okay. So what I'm saying with this, right, is that because we all disagree on like let's say like a level, for example, abortion, right, it cannot be the case that it exists. Because if we all disagree on something, we cannot say that it is true to be the case that it is, for example, let's say, murder is wrong, right? Or no, let's give capital punishment because that's more better, right? Let's say I say capital punishment is like wrong, and someone says capital punishment is fine, right? The other person might think that it is true that capital punishment is okay. In terms of morality, it is morally permissible, right? Whereas I might say that it is not morally permissible to give someone to give someone capital punishment, which shows that there's disagreement and that it cannot be true or false.
Well, that's not necessarily the case. Are you saying when people disagree on mathematics, are you saying that we can't understand whether mathematics can be true or false?
Well, okay, now I actually struggle with this one to be honest, because mathematics is more of an abstract concept, right? We cannot literally hold the number one, can we? Unless we like get like a big number one, foam thing, whatever, right? But what I'm saying with this,
I
right,
mean, I
is
don't think we can hold kindness or
well, yeah,
goodness or
I
badness.
guess you say that, right? But with the terms of mathematics, I would say that you can disagree with it. And what the problem that I have with this, right, is that we think that one plus one equals two, right? That's obvious, right? But how do we like? It's I do struggle with this one because you do pose a great question. But like, I might sound stupid when I say this, but like, how do we know that one plus one equals two, and how do we know that like it's kind of like hard to explain because, for example,
No,
even
it's not a
people
stupid question.
is there any way we can literally know that like 1 exists and 1 plus 1 equals 2? Because it's a concept. It doesn't actually exist in
So think
reality.
of math rather than math, even though math is called a language, which I mean it truly is. Yeah, think of math as more of a language. Math is just a descriptor of reality. It's not a prescriptor of reality. So
Yeah.
all math is saying is that, for example, when we reference the number 1, for example, when we said we have one planet, we understand the planet is there, right? But
Yeah.
when but let's say planet 2 is next to it, we reference 2 as a descriptor of that there are both planets. For example, when we use the word another, if I say there's this planet and another planet, this isn't prescribing those planets. It's describing the state of being and existence that we can understand from those planets, right? Numerical values and these mathematical values that we represent, all these things are truly just saying is that we can describe reality on such a basis. So in this instance, it's a little bit more than just saying that like it's a little bit more than just saying it's true, right? Because math in order to say math is false, you'd essentially be saying reality is false, right? Which would be a bit silly, right? Because if we say unless someone's questioning on whether we have multiple planets, which of course, in terms of a debate, it makes sense why someone would. But I mean, naturally, if you go up to anyone and you say, how many planets are there? Are there more than one planet? They'd probably tell you, yeah, there's more than one. But that's not them making the idea that there are 2 planets and referencing the number 2 and the number 1 as separate entities, right? They're simply describing the existence and the level of existence that these planets are on, right? That's all. And they're just simply just describing the plurality of the existence of these planets.
Would you eat butt?
You tend to keep it up.
No. Leave me alone.
What?
I will meet up on my own terms, head ass nigga. And change my fucking name. Why am I
Alright, so like,
Okay.
Why is my name
Thank you.
Simba?
Anyways. Let me try to say. So, what are you trying to get at with this? With I guess like the example of maths.
Well, I'm just saying, you're making the basis on the fact that we have disagreements and that we all don't understand. But I don't think objective features. I don't think their existence is based on our understanding. I think that's actually directly against the idea of objective features. I think it's analytical truth that objective features are mind independent from us. So if our minds disagree on something, I don't think our disagreement is effective on the weight or existence or the level of existence that such a thing would be on, right? So even if we were to, so let's say in another world, if we were to presuppose that we had objective features of the world, I don't think disagreements on them would mess with the fact that whether those objective features are true or not. I just think that these objective features of the world maybe cannot be necessarily understood by the way we think, right?
Yeah. Okay, that's good. I don't know. Fuck. Is there anything else I can give? I think. That might be all I have. Okay. I can give like another one. Okay. What about? Okay. What about people that believe in this? How to say it? Like, what about people that believe? How to say it? I don't know how to explain it. What about people that create, I guess, say their own morality, like via experiences, in the sense that, let's say someone experiences like, um, let's say someone's captured by a tribe, right? And this tribe cannibalizes its own people, but through their experience, what they used to think is wrong, aka cannibalism, they start to believe is morally okay. Or people that are still in tribes and believe that it's okay to kill someone. How would you explain that?
Wait, so I'm sorry. So you're asking me to explain on why certain people within cannibalism is right in in comparison to other regional cultures?
Yes.
I mean, well, it's simply explained by this idea, right? If we interpret, for example, okay, how about this? If you walk up, if you were to walk up right now to your mother and tell her you're a cannibal, what would she say? What do you think her response would be?
I think she'd laugh at me, to be honest.
Okay. Would you say that that laugh is a okay. Actually, how about this? I'll give a better example. You walk up and tell your I don't know, coworker that cannibalism is good. What do you think their response is going to be?
I don't have a coworker. I'm in school.
Oh my god,
Your
bro.
classmate.
Okay, my classmate. I think he would just I think he would just laugh at me too.
Right. Would you say that this is a physiological response to a moral statement that you've made?
Well, yeah, I'd say so.
Right. And if you were to tell someone who agreed with cannibalism, I think cannibalism is good. What do you think their response would be?
I think they'd be kind of confused in the sense that because they already agree with it, and I'm just reaffirming what they believe. I think they'd be kind of
You just
confused
happen
of
to
why I'm
talk to one.
reaffirming
You
it.
don't even know if they agree with it or not. You just like happen to. Like you're just expressing your statement. How do you think they like
I think they kind of like not in agreement and kind of like go into how they feel about it too. I would say.
right. Right. Would you say that this is a physiological response to such a moral statement?
Um, yeah, I think so. I'm not too sure because I think maybe like the nod, like the nod in terms of agreement would be like a sign. I guess.
Yeah. It's a physical response you're having in response to hearing a statement that could be truth apt into your logic, right? So the idea that we're facing is simply just that you know, if if you were to tell someone from different cultures something and they both respond like they both have physiological responses in this instance, like in such an instance, we'd literally be seeing these responses in the external world regardless of different cultures, which in itself would be just vouching for what I'm arguing in the beginning. Because remember, all I was saying by this instance is simply just that these moral truths can be objective and that they can be expressed and refer to moral facts that transcend culture, times, and situations, right? In this moral instance and principle that I'm putting into pursuit is simply just the idea that physiological responses, right, in such an idea. That's kind of what the analogy with the whole society that I was going with, but yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll probably concede because I have like no idea how to respond to this because I've never done something before, but it seems interesting.
Well, you said you can, bro, I'm lagging. I don't know why.
I said I concede because I have nothing to really how I have no way to respond to this since I don't know. I'm out of argument basically.
Okay. That's fair. All right, GG.
GG.